Good girl. Good girl. Come on. Hey, what's happening, everybody? Happy Sunday to you. Happy Mother's Day to all the great moms out there. It's been a while since I put one of these out, and in the spirit of Mother's Day, I wanted to send this out for everybody. First and foremost, I hope you're all safe and staying healthy. Hopefully, we will start to get back to some normalcy in this economy, but I think it's going to take a while. However, and I will tell you, the markets have surprised me. You know, the hopeism out there with signs of the economy, starting to get back to normal has been a lot more powerful than I anticipated. Still, I've had some nice trades. Could have played it a lot better. Been very cautious, probably overly cautious, but I'm okay with that. I do think that we're going to continue to see some bad news, and I've said this to the pro members many times that I think there are going to be some really big winners that maybe we didn't think about from this whole experience, the coronavirus, and then there's going to be some really big surprise losers, and I think we could see some companies disappear that we didn't anticipate would disappear, right? So, I mean, we're starting to see bankruptcy filings from the Nordstroms and the J.C. Penney's, and the AMC has hired a bankruptcy attorney, Hertz, right? I mean, we're seeing some companies to come out with some bad news, and I think that's going to continue. And but like I said, the market has been incredibly strong. So let's take a look at a couple of things here. I want to take a look at real quickly. Take a look at the economic calendar for next week, which really, it's pretty amazing. I mean, the economic calendar, we're certainly getting just a barrage of really bad news, and it doesn't seem to impact the market at all. But we get CPI, core CPI, federal budget on Tuesday, producer price index on Wednesday. We get initial jobless claims on Thursday, retail sales ex autos, Empire State Index, industrial production on Friday, capacity utilization, job openings, consumer sentiment, and business inventory. So look, the economic data, we expect that to be pretty negative, but that doesn't seem to really be impacting the overall market. So there's a disconnect between what's actually happening out there and the way the market is reacting to it. And I think it's just caught a lot of people on the wrong side. Everyone was looking at, the fact that the market should be heading lower, and it is doing the exact opposite of what everyone was anticipating. So we've had a big move, big bounce up, and that makes me extremely cautious still, because I do think that we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of the economy getting back to any kind of significant normalcy. So got to be careful out there, but there's definitely opportunity. We'll see what this week presents. So let's go through the industries and the sectors really quick. Gold is absolutely bull flagging, and the side piece to this is that we were in a lot of debt before the coronavirus, and we are really ramping up that debt during coronavirus. At some point we're going to have to pay the price for this. I don't know when that happens, but gold certainly is acting very well. Nice bull flag, and maybe it consolidates a bit more. Gold miners, I think, are worth keeping an eye on, and I think it's worth, potentially taking some positions in that space as a safety trade. I don't know when this is all going to come home to roost, but at some point it will happen. So gold and gold miners, I think you definitely want to keep an eye on, probably more for swing or long-term hold consideration. If gold breaks out to new highs, I think it's going to take some of those miners with it. IBB, we got the ASCO conference coming up. I put it on the blog. I think that, IBB has been one of the strongest sectors out there. We did get a bit of a pullback. We closed this gap and actually are now bouncing up here and retesting highs. And with the ASCO conference, we could be getting some positive news out of that conference that could lift some of the biotech names. So I think it's worth keeping a close eye on the space this week and see if we can take out this area of potential price resistance. IWM did manage to get back above the declining 50-day moving average, held it last week, kind of putting in a little flag pattern there. Worth keeping an eye on IWM, right? We'll see. I mean, we kind of put in a lower high here, right? Let's see if maybe we just flag out and then we can go back up and retest the 200-day in this area of price resistance, or if we wind up pulling back and maybe taking out this low right here where it tested the 50-day moving average. We'll see what happens. IYT got above the 50-day and actually broke back below the 50-day. And at the end of the week there, we did manage to climb back above it. But I think that's going to be a tough sector to be in, right? Airlines got hit because of Warren Buffett and him exiting. But airlines are still going to be needed. JetBlue actually was showing a little bit of strength on Friday into the close. Several of the airlines actually. I kind of am interested in the space, but I do want to get in probably lower at a lower price, and maybe that never happens. But JetBlue is one that I'd like to jump into. But I still kind of feel as though they might be a little on the high side after the bounce they've had recently. So worth keeping an eye on the space. IYT, NUGT, and JNUG, both something to consider, right? Junior Miners Bull ETF and Gold Miners ETF, both worth keeping an eye on for trading opportunities if gold really does take off. QQQs, can't deny the unbelievable strength within the big tech space. I mean, that has been where people are flocking. There's a lot of momentum there. Could it continue? I suppose it could. I think there's some names that are pretty extended there. You need to be a little bit cautious because we've had a huge run. We did have the death cross, and the 50-day is actually trying to curl up and maybe get back above the 200-day, get a nice golden cross. That would be pretty positive. But big move, short period of time, coming up into a potential gap fill. Maybe we fill the gap and then we get a pullback. I don't know, but be cautious, I think, in that space. And if you've got profits, if you're fortunate enough to buy these lows and you've got some profits, take some off. Please take some off the table. I'm not telling you to sell everything, but lock in some profits if you've got a nice profit, and raise that powder, right? Keep some powder dry in case the markets do fall back. I mean, look, we've had a great run. Maybe we continue to, just keep running no matter what the jobless numbers are, no matter what the unemployment rate is, no matter who files bankruptcy. Maybe we're going to never see another down week again in the markets. I think that's extremely highly unlikely. So, if you've got profits, if you're fortunate enough to jump in when things were getting crushed and you've got some good profits, lock those gains, man. Lock some of those gains and build your powder just in case we get another, fearful pullback in the markets. Do I think that we will go down and test the recent lows? I don't know. I don't have the answer. Would I like to see that? I probably would like to see us pull back there because it would create, I think, some great opportunities to jump into some good stocks for long-term holds or swings. But, it may not happen. Maybe we just continue to consolidate a bit. Maybe we get somewhat, some kind of a pullback to areas of potential support. But I want to have powder dry for those opportunities. So S&P 500 did get back above the 50-day. A little bit of consolidation there, right below the 200-day. Would like to see this either continue to consolidate and build out a base, at the very least hold this, what was it, what's 270 level or so. But it's actually been pretty impressive. We'll see what happens this week. TVIX, UVXY, there's no trade there, right? No volatility in the market, so got to be. If we do get some kind of a significant pullback, if we do see some fear in the marketplace, those are trading opportunities. Do not chase them on the very first move, because you can get smoked in these things pretty quickly, right? So worth keeping an eye on for a trading opportunity, but need to see some fear and weakness out there in the markets. USO getting a little bit of a bounce last week. Oil and energy has been a very bad, rough sector for a long time, and it's looked like grim death for a long time. But maybe we're putting in some kind of a short-term bottom on USO and on some of these energy names. Worth keeping an eye on. I actually have a couple of names related to the sector in this week's list. Worth keeping an eye on. If oil can manage to continue to move higher as the economy starts to kind of open, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But USO and energy space, I think you want to keep an eye on. Aerospace and defense has actually, it had the big pullback. It had a nice little bounce, and it's been in consolidation mode for a while. It is messing with the 50-day moving average, but it kind of looked like the pattern that this is building. And I think space, you kind of want to keep an eye on. Mostly those are long-term swing or hold opportunities. I missed a great opportunity in one that I've traded many times. I want to jump back into. It's on this week's list. But aerospace and defense kind of does look as though it's shoring up. And it looks like it's trying to get back above the 50-day moving average. So worth keeping an eye on that space. XHB, surprisingly, home builders have actually been pretty strong. And there was a positive mention in Barron's this weekend about the home builders. So could see some continued strength there. Maybe we get up and we test the 200-day moving average. Worth keeping an eye on that space. But back above the 50-day moving average. Positive mention in Barron's space could be hot this week. We'll see. XLB, building materials, same type of scenario here. We've gotten above the 50-day moving average, kind of consolidating. Maybe we need more time to consolidate, but actually looking fairly good there. XLE, even though oil has been weak, some of the energy names have showed some strength recently and have gotten back above the 50-day moving average, trying to maybe go up and fill this gap. Worth keeping an eye on that space, like I said. XLF, financials, still below a declining 50-day moving average. Worth keeping an eye on the sector, but probably one of my least favorite sectors out there. It's been a sector that struggled for a long time, but we are seeing some constructive price action, it does look like here. Need to get back above the 50-day moving average. XLI Industrials, same thing, right? Trying to get back above the 50-day. Kind of putting in a little bit of consolidation pattern here. XLP, Consumer Staples, is really trying to kind of hold on to the 50-day moving average. I think it's an interesting space. I think I think maybe not that we're starting to normalize some of these companies that have had tremendous growth because everybody was hoarding. Maybe we could, they could have some tough comps coming up actually, but I still think Consumer Staples is an interesting spot or interesting sector to keep an eye on. XLV healthcare kind of putting in a little flag pattern above the 50-day, above the 200-day. 50-day looks like it's kind of curling up a little bit here. I think that space still looks pretty constructive, pretty positive. Might need more time to consolidate, but XLY consumer discretionary, amazing bounce here. And now with restaurants opening up and stuff like that, maybe this space continues to show some strength. I think we've gotten ahead of ourselves here. Might need to consolidate. Would even like to see consumer discretionary pull back to an area of potential support, but no denying we are trying to test the 200-day moving average. So we'll see what happens this week. XOP, oil and exploration, filled the gap, flagging out a little bit here. Kind of interesting. We'll see what happens next week, or this week coming up. And then XRT, even though we've had these bankruptcies and nobody's going shopping, at least not out at the malls or anything like that, actually looking pretty strong there on XRT. I am concerned that we have maybe pulled a lot of hopeful good news forward, and maybe when reality starts to check in on what actual numbers, even if we are opening up a bit, what actual numbers look like, could scare some people. Right now there is no plan, there is no model for what we're going through, right? So there's a whole bunch of unknowns out there, and as things start to open up and try to get back to normalcy, they're gonna these analysts are gonna be able to put numbers to things, and if those numbers are a lot less than what we were hoping for or anticipating, that could really impact some of these stocks that have had recent runs. So keep that in mind. All right, we're going to close this stuff out, and let's take a look real quickly at what we've got coming up next week in terms of earnings. There are a lot of names here that I think are interesting and could have some decent sized moves off of earnings reports. Under Armour is one that's been beaten up pretty badly. Inovio is another one that could be interesting. We've got some pot names that are reporting. Tilray and Aurora, those could be interesting. Could be interesting for the sector. Let's see, who else do we have? Oh, Draftkings, which has been unbelievably strong, is reporting Friday. That could be an interesting one. It's had a very, very nice run. Datadog is another one that I think could be interesting. As a matter of fact, while I'm thinking of it, I wanted to, we'll take a look at Datadog in a second. Smile Direct Club, which has had a big run, that could be interesting. If they disappoint or give bad guidance, this thing has recently had a pretty big run. That could pull back, and then if actually they have a beat and give good guidance, I think there's a decent sized amount of shorts in there that could get squeezy. So that could be one to keep an eye on as well. So pretty big, still got some decent names. JDDick.com could be interesting. Another one that could be worth paying attention to for their earnings. But definitely, Cisco and Applied Material still got some big names reporting. We'll see how that impacts the market this week. All right, so let's get to the list of stocks to watch. And there's going to be some names on here that are off the beaten path. Probably a lot of people don't know about them, or they're small floats. Some have already reported. Some may have earnings reports coming up, so make sure you check that before you go jumping into any of these names. Just to be off the technicals. Make sure you check to see if they've got earnings on deck, because that could be a catalyst for either direction in stock, right? So, all right, let's hop into the list of stocks to watch for this week. So NGVC reported earnings last week. That's what this big pop was for, on good volume. First day of the pop, and taking out a longer term trend line of resistance. This one here, right? But we are coming up to an even longer trend line of potential resistance right here. So by basically around 1670 to 1750, you'd be coming up into this really long-term trend line. And on the weekly time frame, we're pretty overbought, and actually stochastics are starting to curl down a bit. So knowing that you've got this long-term trend line resistance overhead, maybe what we look for on this NGVC is some type of a consolidation or pullback or pattern to develop on the daily. Stochastics are just starting to curl up. Maybe we pull back or we flag out and we test this $14 area as potential price support. Could be an interesting spot to potentially take this as a short-term swing. I did not go through the earnings call. I need to do that, but it was a pretty impressive pop off of earnings with volume. Maybe worth keeping an eye on this one for a pullback to areas of potential support. If 14 fails, the next area of potential support could be somewhere in the $13 area, and that could be interesting. The real big level where we've got some significant support would be at about 1160, right? So we've got all these areas, all these points of contact in this let's say 1160 to $12 area in that zone. We've got a lot of points of contact, and that could be an area where you look to take this for a swing or long-term hold consideration in that zone. So not a bad looking setup there on NGVC. BTU. So listen, BTU, look, coal. Why would you even think about coal? Because, who wants to own coal, right? It's just putting in a basing pattern. Actually, one of the pro members brought this up last week. Russell, got a lot of respect for this guy. And, this put in a beautiful, it's trading within a box. It's trading between these two levels, 255 and 370. It's up, it just closed above the 50-day moving average. Could be an interesting type play. So, we had a 3-day pullback to this area of support, and boom, we had a 1 day with some volume taking out the 50-day. So, if we can take out $4 with conviction, maybe we get some kind of a nice little trading opportunity. I probably would be looking at this as more of a day trade. It'd be nice to see a red to green type move on Monday, pull back to 335, 350. That could be your zone for entry. You put your stop below 325, and you're looking for a potential pop up to $4. Pretty good risk reward there on that one, so worth keeping an eye on that. Mara, this is not the one I meant to put on here. Hold on a second, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the one I was looking for. Mara is a patent play, and actually I don't care for Mara. What I meant to put on this list was MRAM, MRAM. Had a beautiful setup on the daily, and it was on the list last week for the pro members. I did not catch this bounce. They reported earnings, and the thing gapped up on huge volume for it. Closed just below the 200-day moving average. Now, I've been watching this name actually for the last several weeks, and it broke out of this little base here, set up perfectly, beautifully with a flag pattern, and then those earnings came out and had a big pop. Now, what I'm looking for here is a potential pullback to support 380 to 350 in that area as a potential entry. I do want to go through the earnings call transcript, but I really like the look of this setup here. It's taken out it has taken out with some authority this very long-term trend line, right? So we're just in the beginning phases of a trend reversal potentially on this. You know, $6, 580, let's call it 575 to $6 is a big area of potential resistance. So I wouldn't be shocked if we were to see this consolidate for a bit of time here. Could we get it? I mean, if you look back at the history on this for the weekly, uh, you know, you get one good week, and then maybe a little bit of follow through, and then it kind of stalls, right? Maybe that's the same pattern we see here, but um, this was the first day of the pop of breaking out of this pattern here. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Maybe a pullback to 450, 440, 420. Maybe I start to dip my toe. I am looking at this one as more of a long-term hold type play. Very tiny float, 14.3 million shares in the float looks like. So can trade extremely thin. So you got to be careful with this one. But I really like the way that that it popped last week off of earnings. It looked like earnings were actually pretty good. So MRAM, worth keeping an eye on that one for a potential long-term hold or swing. Swing bada bada. All right, moving on. XERS. So another one that had a nice pop out of a nice little pattern here, right at the 50-day moving average, with some increased volume, popped up into an area of price resistance and pulled back a little bit, and it is contending with this long-term trend line. So a pullback to 280 to $3, there could be an area of support there to bounce off of. Stochastic's just starting to curl up. Not sure what popped this, but worth keeping an eye on for a potential day trading scalp opportunity. Like I said, in the 280, 280, 270, 275 to $3 range could be the entry zone on XERSTEN. Full disclosure, I'm trying to get a fill on this sucker. Been watching it for a while. Carl Icahn was involved and had a purchase significantly higher, I believe, in 10. You've had some insider buys, 95,000 shares, CEO, CFO at 9 and change. It's a thicker stock, but they reported earnings, I believe, and broke out of this little flag pattern, which was happening right at the 50-day. I am trying to get a little fill of a starter in this name. I did briefly go over their earnings transcript. I mean, they've made some moves in terms of financing that are better for the company. I think adjusted some covenants and stuff like that. So good things, I think, happening there. Worth keeping an eye on this. I think at one point they were exploring strategic alternatives for some of their potential businesses. Worth keeping an eye on this. More for a swing or long-term hold. If I could get an entry in the 480, under $5, 480, 450, somewhere in that area, that would be fantastic. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what I have my limit buy-in, but it's just for a little starter position, and I think it's just under $5 is what I'm looking at. Or maybe it might be 590. I can't remember. But anyway, I'm trying to get a fill on this bad boy. As more of a swing or long-term hold play. So, I mean, it looks like we've got some accumulation happening here. Some pretty good volume, pretty good accumulation going on down here. Kind of got a reverse head and shoulders pattern on the daily. I just like it, and am trying to get involved there. UNFI, I put a trade plan out for. I think I put a trade plan out. for TEN for the pro members on Friday. So, UNFI I think this was on last week's list, and actually pulled back to an area of potential price support and had a nice little spike on Friday. I'm looking for, a range break, or break out of this pattern right here and take out 1250 with some authority. Nice little pop on Friday. Stochastic starting to curl up. Maybe we get some follow through and take out that trend line. Worth keeping an eye on that. Actually, I kind of think that I'm looking at that one as more of a swing as well. HLX, I think their earnings are behind them as well. HLX, which reported, maybe they haven't reported. It's one of the oil names. Actually, I liked it down here and was looking for a potential trading opportunity in it, and we missed it. I missed it. I don't know if everybody missed it, but I missed it, and it kind of broke out a little bit. Had a nice pop up into the 280 area. There is a gap to fill on the daily. It's flagging out just above the 20-day moving average. Worth keeping an eye on it for a trend line break if any of the oil names start to move. I like this one. I actually think their balance sheet is in fairly decent shape compared to a lot of the companies within this sector that are out there. A little bit thicker of a stock, but worth keeping an eye on. HLX, INSG. So I recently had an amazing trade, on INSG I own this from way, way lower. And got out of it when it got up to 11 and change, and it continued to go to 15. So they just did a notes offering, which actually was a really smart move because they got getting better interest rate on the note. I mean, by almost 5 points. It's just, it's a really smart move on their part. It's had a pullback. There was a negative article out, hit piece from some short seller saying this thing is, going back to 650. That was their price target. I would love this thing to go back to 650. I hope he's right. I hope it goes back to 650 because I would absolutely jump on it pretty aggressively for a long-term hold play. It's a big 5G play. The work at home thing has given these guys, a big boost in business, even during the coronavirus. And I think that that's going to continue as the economy, picks back up. I think this is going to be a big winner in the long run. It has had an amazing run. Would love it to pull back and test this 950 to 960 area. And I probably would start to dip small. If it were to pull back and test the 50-day at 840, I probably would look to add. And if we got back down to 650 or $5, I'd add pretty aggressively and bring my dollar cost average down and be willing to wait it out like I did last time for the big move higher. So I like INSG as a long-term hold play. I hope the guy's right. I hope it goes to 650, but I will be dipping along the way. And if it winds up breaking, just to go back to this real quick, if it winds up breaking above this trend line and taking out the $12 holla, we could get a pop back up into the $14, $15 area for a short-term trading opportunity and look at it. So, I mean, I could look to day trade INSG if it had some real good volume, and if it was taking out this trend line, or, what I'd really prefer to do is build a position for a long-term hold on a pullback to areas of potential support. INFN, these guys report this week, Tuesday after the close. It's been kind of basing out a little bit here in the $6 area. There have been insider buys at various different levels, and it's not a great looking setup technically. I mean, we kind of broke down, but I mean, it's trying to reclaim the 200-day moving average. We've got a death cross. We've got the 50-day cross below the 200. Stochastics are starting to curl up. So, if they have a good earnings report, maybe we see a nice move in INFN. It's a little bit thicker of a stock. It is a turnaround story. One that I liked down here, and it kept building, kept stair-stepping higher. Watching this one for their earnings report on Tuesday after the close. We'll see how it reacts. Could be a trading opportunity there. ELMD is another one that is reporting earnings this week, and that is actually reporting same day, Tuesday after the close. This thing is messing with, I believe, just want to make sure, all-time highs, right? All-time highs, blue skies, a lot of momentum in this name. They make something called the Smart Vest. Maybe because of the coronavirus, that's what we're getting this big pop for. But if you look at the volume, I mean, it has some pretty good accumulation. It's getting a little extended. I guess for this one, kind of try to identify areas of potential price support. Let's see what the earnings announcement has. And, this could have been, I'm not sure what this dip was all about, but, this thing could pull back to $7 pretty quickly. So you got to be a bit careful here. But blue skies, interesting. It may have already made a move into earnings, but we'll see what happens. It could be worth keeping an eye on. It looks like it's got a very tiny float on ELMD. Latest float 4.2 million shares. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that one. It's worth keeping an eye on. SDC, I guess I did put it on this list. We're kind of right here at this potential gap fill, right? They report looks like Wednesday after the close, right? So this one could be interesting, just because I think that there's quite a few shorts in the name, could get squeezy. I just want to make sure. Let me just make sure. LE stock. Yeah, Smile Direct Club. Okay. So yeah, that one could be interesting. It's kind of putting in a bottom, a rounding bottom pattern. You got a cup right now, no handle, but kind of a cup pattern there. Interesting, or a saucer pattern. Worth keeping an eye on it. Could get interesting off earnings. Maybe it runs into earnings. You get a gap fill. I would, if you held anything in through the earnings, I would, just hold a lotto, right? Would be pretty careful with that one. TPC, Tudor Perini construction company, reported earnings, big volume. I think they reported on earnings on Thursday. Nice pop on volume, actually taking out an area of price resistance in the 750 area. Could this get some follow through? Possibly. We get a run up into the 10 to 1050 area as potential price resistance. What I'd really actually like to see is this kind of consolidate and pull back, maybe build out a little flag pattern right on top of the 50-day. Looking at this one as more of a swing or long-term hold play, keeping in mind that if the economy does continue to open up, maybe we get some kind of a what the hell am I thinking? Infrastructure bill, right? If we got an infrastructure bill, these guys would benefit from that potentially, maybe land some contracts. So worth keeping an eye on Tudor Perini. I like it more as a swing or long-term hold play. 680 to 725, 750 would kind of be my ideal entry for a TPC for a long-term hold. CLVS coiling right underneath the $9 Hala small float, 21 million shares in the float, looking for a potential break over this area, 925 to 950. Maybe get a 10 to, 1070 test. Looking for just a trading opportunity in CLVS. Not really looking for a long-term hold or swing. BZH. I mentioned the positive mention in Barron's this weekend on home builders. I missed this. This is one I wanted to jump into for a long-term hold or swing. Kind of near where this double bottom pullback was. I did not get in because I can't remember what happened. It popped. Anyway, it's still got an interesting setup here. I really want to own this on a pullback to $5.50 to $5. That's where I would like to get in. May not get that opportunity, right? Might take out this little area of price resistance at $7.50. Could be a trading opportunity there if that happens. So watching this for a potential swing or a day trading opportunity with volume. I would much rather get this thing between the $6 and $5 area, but I may not get that. I mean, it's got a pretty nice little setup here right at resistance. See if it takes that out this week. Could be a short-term trade. OSG, so oil and gas related type name here. I'm not sure. This actually had a nice 2-day pop. Got up into an area of resistance and pulled back. They're a shipping company, and the CEO, let's see, that was back in 2018. I just like the look of the setup on this thing. I would prefer to get it probably, closer to $2. Is a really good area of support there. Might not get that opportunity. Maybe I start to dip on a pullback to 250 to 225, 220. Maybe look to add if it were to pull back to the 200-day at $1.95. I don't know. It's a pretty thin name. I like the look of the daily. If we can take out $3 with conviction, this could get pretty interesting. So worth keeping an eye on it. RRR is Red Rock Casinos. One of the Fertitta brothers bought 700,000 shares of this at 1871 back in August. And right now we're kind of consolidating here in the nine and change range. Or actually, that's where I want to buy it. I want to buy it at 9 or lower. Would love it to pull back to $7. But it does appear as though this is building out a base here. You take out $12 with conviction, could get interesting in RRR. Several of the gaming names, I felt as though we were jumping in, or the stocks were reacting way early because Vegas is a ghost town, probably going to be a ghost town for a long time. Red Rock Resorts, though, is more of a locals casino. If, we do open up and things start to normalize, Red Rock could come back pretty quickly. And same thing with Golden Gaming. I like them both, I think, but there's a part of me that just feels as though the casinos have reacted too well, too quickly. But pretty good looking setup on the daily, so worth keeping an eye on it. REKR, very thin name, sold off a division recently. I liked this one on a pullback to $3. I was actually watching it for just a short-term trading opportunity, potentially a swing. Now this thing it actually broke out of this little pattern here. It held the 200-day. It's at an area of potential resistance, maybe waiting on earnings. It trades very thin, but look at the accumulation that looks like it's happening here. So I kind of like this name. I feel as though I've missed the trade. I certainly missed a trade in it, but it could set up for another one. If it takes out this area of resistance, could be a scalp opportunity. I don't know when their earnings are. I wouldn't hold this through earnings. And if I did, it would just be a small lotto position that I would hold. But worth keeping an eye on. If this thing gets some real volume, and it takes out $5, this thing could go on a crazy little run. So uh, worth keeping an eye on this one, right? It's a highly speculative name, very thin, but I like it, and I like the way it's looking on the daily. Could be a trading opportunity there. If they do report earnings and you get a pullback to an area of potential price support, I might consider this thing for a swing, depending on what they have to say off their earnings report. WTI, another oil name, one of my favorites. I still have a position in this thing, small position. I took some. I've played this one actually so many times, and I took some down at $2, and then I took some at $1.20, and now it's coiling, it's flagging right here just underneath $3, and if we take out three, it could be a day trading opportunity. Stochastics look like they're starting to curl up. Had some nice accumulation going on in this name. I would like to add to my long-term hold on a pullback to $2 or $1.80 if that were to happen. But WTI, I think, is another one of the oil names to keep an eye on. OPRX, full disclosure, I started a position in this one at just, I think, right around $10. There's some area of support. They actually reported last week. I need to go through their earnings report, but they reported last week, and I like the space that these guys are in. There's also been some small insider buys, 950 to 980 area. If this were to pull back, to 920 or 850, somewhere in that area, I would be looking to add to my long-term hold. It's a speculative position, smaller float, but I like the industry that these guys are in. I think these guys could be a long-term beneficiary of the this COVID virus stuff. I think their business will be positively impacted by that for the long term, and they've done some recent acquisitions. They're going to a services as a software as a service business model and recurring revenue, and I love it. So I don't know. I like this one. It's like I said, it's more of a long-term hold play. Um, if you could get this thing at, a pullback to 975, $10 down to 850 could be an opportunity to jump into this name, have some patience with it, and let it play out. But worth keeping an eye on OPRX. RBBN, full disclosure, I own it. These guys just reported earnings. They did a big acquisition. You got a potential flat top breakout. You've got a reverse head and shoulders pattern on the daily. I think it's an interesting. I think this is another one where they could benefit from the COVID and work at home stuff. They've teamed up with they've got product with Microsoft Teams. I like this name. I would like to add to this name if it were to pull back to the 280 area, 280 to 250. I would love to add this name, add to the position. So more of a long-term hold play, but could also be a short-term, day trade scalp if it takes out this 375 area with conviction. I think you get a forward test. You also would be taking out the 200-day moving average. So I don't know. I kind of like the look of RBBN, so worth keeping an eye on that one. That's kind of an off-the-wall name. Veru, Veru. Great looking setup here on the daily. Nice little pop. I'm not sure if that was off of earnings, but we're kind of flagging out and working our way back into the Bollinger Bands. Might need a bit more time to build out this pattern, but really good looking setup here on Veru. And if we could take out $4 hollow with conviction, I think you get a pop back up into the 460 area. So Stochastics kind of look like they're curling over, rolling over to the downside. So, like I said, might need more time to consolidate, but um, pull back to 350. This could be an interesting spot of potential support on Veru. So keep an eye on that name, MMMB. So this is a really off the wall one. Actually, Geo Investing is the one that turned me on to this story. They're a frozen food play, I believe, Italian frozen food, and obviously, done pretty well recently off of the coronavirus stuff. Big spike in frozen dinners, right? And could be. I mean, this has got an interesting look on the daily here. Big spot on the weekly time frame, coming up into the 175 area. Big spot of resistance. If it can take that out, being a small float that it is, you can see a pretty big move. I mean, this thing has had some range before. I think it's worth keeping an eye on this one for a trading opportunity. Could be a higher risk swing play. Ideal entry, I don't know, somewhere between 120 and 145, maybe that would, or 150 could be an interesting spot to start building a position. But if this thing takes out the recent highs, 175 with volume, could be a day trading opportunity too. So trades super thin. Keep that in mind. 19,000 shares traded hands on Friday. But I got to tell you, Maj Geo is fantastic at finding, some golden opportunities out there of names that nobody's following. You got to have a lot of patience with these things, but they can pay off big. I mean, I've seen this guy pick some stocks that have, 2,000, 3,000% over time in returns. I mean, and this has got a very interesting look. So worth keeping an eye on this. Could be worth taking just a little lotto position in this, right? And holding on to it. RFIL, another one that last week. So HWCC is one that I've played before. I wanted to, I was looking to get it back in at $2. It actually pulled close to 2, already bounced off of earnings, but now it's pulling back a little bit. Same kind of business, and I was actually turned onto this from another person over at Geo, saying that they really didn't care for HWCC after I shared that thought and said, I like this company, kind of in the same business. I like RFIL. I like the setup on the daily here. Consolidating, 470 to $5 could be an interesting support zone on RFIL. Stochastic starting to curl to the upside. It's worth. It's got a small float, but I think this one has got an interesting look and worth keeping an eye on it for a potential swing or long-term hold. I believe they have positive cash flow as well. NAT. So, I had a big pop off after being on, I think it was on Fast Money and, oil storage. These guys are oil, shipping company, and they're getting paid, I think, $70,000 a day to store oil. And it had a big pop. It's pulled back. I think there were some lofty price targets put on this. CEO bought, 60,000 shares at $4.72 in March. It pulled back. Interestingly enough, right? I mean, we pulled back to 472 the other day, and it bounced right off of that. So you've got a little bit of support going on there. I think this is worth a swing. If you can get it between 420 and 450, 470, could be worth taking a little dip on this thing. More of a swing or long-term hold play on NAT. And I'm sorry that this video is taking so long. But last one, B-Hat. So this was on my list last week. It didn't do a whole lot, but it's putting in a heck of a nice pattern just above the 50 EMA, 50-day moving average. Kind of got a cup with handle thing going on here. Looking for a trend line break. What I find really interesting about this is a recent IPO. It's taken out this long-term trend line, right? So maybe we have the beginning of a trend reversal on this. high risk. I think it's a China name, tiny float, high risk, but worth keeping an eye on this thing for potential trading opportunity if we can take out this trend line with some conviction. And that's it. That's my list for the week and the blog. I hope you find some good ideas on here and you get to take advantage of them. Be careful out there. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And happy Mother's Day to all the moms. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all sometime in the future.